Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're here. This is the entire guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge Edition 7, all in one video. There's a lot of information here, so take a break if you need to. Otherwise, sit back and relax and absorb all of this beautiful information. Let's get into it. We start with the 12 principles of project management, and they are: be a diligent, respectful and caring steward, create a collaborative team environment, effectively engage with stakeholders, focus on the value that you're delivering and make sure that we are delivering value to the business or the organization or to customers, recognize, evaluate and respond to system interactions, and there are going to be many different system interactions and sometimes these are complex, demonstrate leadership behaviors and help our people thrive in our project, tailor the project based on what's happening in the organization or based on the content or the product itself, build quality into processes and deliverables to stop us from making mistakes, navigate complexity, optimize risk responses, so make sure we're uncovering risks in our project, embrace adaptability and resiliency, so uncover that for our people, and enable change to achieve the envisioned future state. Projects are all about change in the end. There are 3 sections to the project management body of knowledge, and we've got the project performance domains. We've got tailoring those project performance domains. And then of course we've got the models, methods and artifacts that we'll be using as project managers throughout the life of our project. With our project performance domains, we've got our stakeholder performance domain, so all the stakeholders we'll need to be interacting with, the team, the project team, the development approach and the life cycle, so how we're actually going about doing our project, the planning of our project, the project work itself, so committing and performing that project work, delivering the item and delivering what we said we're going to deliver, then measuring everything to make sure we're still on track, and lastly, uncertainty and risk and managing that throughout our project. The first one is the stakeholder performance domain, and the outcomes we're looking for here are productive working relationships with all of our stakeholders, stakeholder agreement with the project objectives, so keeping them on side, making sure that they're okay with what's being delivered, stakeholder beneficiaries to be supportive and satisfied with what we're delivering. Key terms we're coming across will be the stakeholder, and that's anyone affected by the project or who's perceived to be affected by the project. And on the right hand side you can see we've got our project manager just in our first circle of influence, and then as our circle of influence gets bigger, we've got governing bodies, project management officers, steering committees, and then ultimately our suppliers and customers and end users and regulatory bodies. With stakeholder engagement, first we want to identify the stakeholders, and we might do that with an organizational chart. Then we want to understand our stakeholders, and we might do that with our stakeholder engagement assessment matrix or something similar. Then we're analyzing our stakeholders, and we could do that with a salience chart, or we could do that with an impact over influence chart as well. Then we're prioritizing our stakeholders, making sure we're engaging the right ones at the right times, engaging with them regularly, and monitoring that engagement as we go along. Stakeholder engagement and communication is used in meetings, phone calls, brainstorming and product demos as well. Now we might use different forms here. We've got push communication where we're pushing it out to the people. So we're sending an email or we're having a telephone call, we're pushing that information out. But then we've got pull communication as well, where the people who are getting that information are getting it from either a bulletin board or a website or a SharePoint site or something similar. They're pulling that information to them from somewhere else. Now what we can use is quick feedback loops as well. So we want to know, did the person understand the message? Do they agree with the message? And is there any information missing? So do they need any extra information? If you're always going through this quick feedback loop, you will have more successful communication. Our next section is team performance. And the outcomes we're looking for with team performance are shared ownership of the project, high-performing teams, leadership displayed by all members so that everyone is leading at all levels. Key terms we'll come across are the project manager, project management team, so the management team, but then the project team itself who's doing the work. In team performance, we've got project team management and leadership, and the difference is this. Management, where we're meeting objectives, having effective processes and monitoring the work, we're getting things done and monitoring that things are getting done. But leadership is where we're looking at the people, growing our people, influencing, motivating, listening and enabling the people that we're working with in our project. We might have centralized leadership, and this is where accountability is on one person, for example, the project manager. We can use a project charter for approval of the scope and the roles, so clarity of the roles if we've got centralized centralized leadership so that everyone understands what's going on. Then we've got distributed leadership, which is shared amongst the team. We've got self-organizing teams with a facilitator, usually a coach role or a lead role, focusing on the growth of the team. The team has autonomy to do what they want as long as it meets the goals that we're aiming for. And it's servant leadership, where we're removing blockers and focusing on the growth of the team. With servant leaders, they focus on obstacle removal, and they're a diversion shield, so they stop other people from interrupting the team and stopping them from getting their work done. There's development opportunities for the team. We're trying to grow them and become the best versions of themselves. Team development then includes vision and objectives, clear roles and responsibilities, team operations and guidance and growth as we're going along and trying to improve the team as the project progresses. With project team culture, the project manager must establish a safe, respectful environment for open communication. We want psychological safety here. We can use things like transparency, integrity, respect, positive discourse, support, courage, celebrating success, and support includes providing encouragement, showing empathy, and active listening. With high-performing project teams, factors associated with this are open communication, shared understanding of the work and the goals, shared ownership, trust, collaboration amongst the team, adaptability, so open to change, resilience in the face of change, empowerment of the team to do the things that they need to get done, and recognition when they do those things. The leadership skills that we're looking for are things like establishing a vision. We want that to be developed collaboratively with stakeholders, and a vision answers these questions. What is the project purpose? What are the project benefits? So what are we delivering? And what defines success? Now, of course, we also need critical thinking, and this is where we need to be aware of personal bias, and we also want to research and analyze data to get to the right answers. We can use deductive reasoning, so this might be a generalized statement with a specific example, or inductive reasoning, which is a specific example that leads to a generalized statement. Next, we want motivation of the team as well, and we've got intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is internal, it's a belief in the work, achievement, self-direction, relatedness, and personal growth. And extrinsic is a money or bonus, so external things like status. Interpersonal skills we'll need as we go along our journey are emotional intelligence, and this is self-awareness, awareness of the things that we're experiencing internally. Self-management, so managing our own emotions. Social awareness, being aware of all of the social intricacies that are going on in the project and in our organization. And social skill, being able to navigate those things well enough to get the job done. We want decision making, and we want conflict management as well. With conflict management, we want to keep communication respectful. We want to focus on the issue, not the person. We want to focus on the present and not dredge up the past. And we want to search for alternatives together. When we're tailoring leadership styles for our project, we want to take into consideration the experience with this type of project that people have, the maturity of the project team members, organizational governance structures that might impact the way that we lead, and distributed teams. So do we need other things in place like video or chat or messaging, or are we just around the corner in the same building? Our next section is development approach and life cycle of our project, and the outcomes we're looking for here are that the development approach is consistent with the deliverables we're delivering. The project life cycle connects that delivery of value with all of the stakeholders from the beginning to the end of the project. And the key terms that we'll come across are things like a deliverable, which is the product or feature we're delivering, the development approach, which is the approach we use to create that deliverable, the cadence, which is all of our meetings and the rhythm of things and interactions that we have on our project, project phase, which is the related activities that complete a deliverable, and the project life cycle, which is all of those phases from beginning to end. Now, there's a relationship between development cadence and the life cycle. So the type of deliverable determines how all of this might be developed. There is different things like risk, certainty or uncertainty, complexity in a project, and need for change. Maybe there's rapid change, or maybe we've got more time. All of this will impact what we do. The delivery cadence is the timing and frequency of project deliverables. And we might have things like a single delivery, where we're just delivering once, multiple deliveries, so we're delivering multiple features, or periodic deliveries, where we're delivering features on a schedule, so multiple deliveries on a fixed schedule, similar to continuous delivery in DevOps. Development approaches that we'll come across are things like predictive development approaches. This is your traditional waterfall approach, and this is useful when the work is easily defined. The scope is collected at the start, there's a large investment or there's high risk, and we can use frequent reviews and change control to keep this type of project under control. The other sort is adaptive, and this is what we consider agile. Now, adaptive uses iterative and incremental approaches. Iterative is where we're taking feedback along the journey, but then we're delivering still in one big go. But incremental is where we're delivering features along our journey, so usable pieces of work. So we're taking that feedback, but we're also delivering multiple features along a timeline. Now, hybrid is a combination of both of these approaches, predictive and adaptive, and this will probably be the most common approach as many organizations take some parts from each of these different approaches. Considerations when we're selecting a development approach, we might consider the product. So what is the degree of innovation that we need? What are the certainty of requirements? Adaptive can be useful if the scope is not well understood. We might have scope stability. Is it very stable or unstable? Do we need to adjust? The ease of change, delivery options. Can it actually be delivered in multiple features or increments? And the risk, safety requirements or regulations. Maybe there's a high amount of regulation and we need a lot of control on this product. With the project, we need to consider stakeholders. Is there actually a product owner available? That might determine whether we use Agile or not. Schedule constraints and funding availability. With the organization, we might consider the organizational structure. Is it flat or is it more bureaucratic? So flat is where we can actually talk to someone, a boss, quite easily, or bureaucratic is where they're far removed from the work and the situation. The culture, the organizational capability, and the project team size and location. With lifecycle phase and definitions, we've got these phases. The feasibility, so that's where we're actually figuring out if it's feasible to create this product, the design of that product, the build of that product, testing that product, then deploying or releasing it, and finally closing off that phase. Now these will be used across all of the different life cycles, but in different ways. For example, waterfall will use all of these but in just once, but adaptive might use all of these for each of the project increments that we're delivering. Kanban uses a flow-based approach, and that has no phase. It's a pull approach where people pull the work only as they're ready. When we're aligning the delivery cadence, development, and life cycle, we're going to look at things like the cadence, so the rhythm and the meetings. So that's where we might have single or multiple deliveries. The development approach, we might have predictive, hybrid, adaptive, which is incremental and iterative approaches. And the life cycle, which is what we've gone through, which design, build, test, deploy, and close. Our next section is project planning performance. So the outcomes we're looking for here are that the project progresses in an organized, deliberate manner, that evolving information is used to produce the deliverables as needed. So if we need to adjust, the process for adapting your plan is based on emerging needs or conditions, so we are adjusting if necessary. The key terms that we'll come across are things like estimates, accuracy, so how correct is it? Did it do what we wanted it to do? And precision, can it do it over and over again? How repeatable is it? Schedule crashing, which is throwing resources at the thing. Schedule fast tracking, which is doing things in parallel to each other at the same time. And of course, our budget. With planning variables, what determines how much planning is done? We might look at the development style. So we might have predictive, which is lots of upfront planning, or adaptive, which is rolling wave planning, where we're planning each increment and planning only in detail as we get closer to that increment. We might look at project deliverables. So construction might need more planning versus software, which might be more flexible. We're going to look at organizational requirements. We might need governance, policies, processes, and culture that might actually need certain ways of work to happen. So we might have to abide by those rules. The market conditions as well. Do we need a certain speed to market? Do we need to release something quickly? And of course, legal or regulatory restrictions that we need to abide by. When we're planning the delivery, planning begins with understanding the business case. So that's our feasibility study. Is it actually feasible for us to deliver this feature or increment or project? The stakeholder requirements, so what they actually need, and the product and project scope. The product scope is all of the features in the product, but the project scope is the work performed to deliver those features as we go along. And we want to break down all of these things, the product scope and the project scope, into a work breakdown structure to break down the work into things that people can actually work on as a team or an individual. With planning variables, we've got estimating. So the types of estimates. Now there are different types of estimates and they start from far away, and as we get closer to the delivery of the project, then we want to get more refined. As you can see, we've got a wide range at the beginning, but then it gets very, very close, and now we want it to be exact. Adjust your estimates for uncertainty, so give it a little bit of leeway if you need to. Projects are inherently uncertain, so use simulation like mock-ups or storyboards or prototypes, and build in reserves, so extra amounts of money that might be needed if things go off track. Accuracy and precision, as we said, accuracy is how correct is it? Is it doing what we needed? Did it hit the target? And precision, can it do it over and over again? Is it repeatable? Other estimating terms we'll see are confidence. So the confidence in our estimates. This increases with experience, and the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Deterministic estimating is a number or a point. Probabilistic estimating is a range of options with probabilities for each of those things. Absolute estimates is just a number. Relative estimates is a comparison to other estimates, so like story cards or story points you'll see in Agile. Flow-based estimates uses cycle time, which is the time to complete something, and throughput, which is the number of those things completed. So that's quite good to determine how long something might take overall. When we're creating our schedule, we'll go through these steps. We're going to decompose the project scope into specific activities using a work breakdown structure as well, but we'll break it down into specific activities that we can then assign to a schedule. Then we want to sequence those activities, of course, and we might use a Gantt chart to do that. Then we're going to estimate the effort, duration, and the people and resources required, allocate those people and resources, and then adjust that sequence, estimates and resources until the schedule is agreed over time. When we're managing our schedule, we might use things like schedule crashing, which is throwing money and resources at it to try and bring that schedule end date closer. Fast tracking, which is doing things at the same time, so doing them in parallel. We're going to come across things like leads and lags. Leads is how much we can bring an item forward. For example, if we're doing a photo shoot and photo editing, we might be able to start editing halfway through our photo shoot because we've got some photos ready. We can bring that forward. With lags, it's how much do we need to delay an item, so it's lagging behind. We might be pouring a concrete foundation for a house, and then we need to wait for that foundation to set. So we've got a 5-day lag here, and then we can do our house frame after that. You will come across dependencies as well, and we've got things like mandatory dependencies which can't be modified, discretionary dependencies which can be modified, external dependencies, so they're impacted by non-project activities external to our project, and internal dependencies which are impacted by our project activities themselves. We're going to have things like rolling wave planning, where we're planning far away items just as a high level idea, and as they get closer, so near term, then we do a detailed plan. So it's just rolling continuously. The faraway items are just a high-level idea. Near term, we do a nice detailed plan. When we're planning our budget, there are certain steps we can go through. Estimates are applied to the project work to create the cost baseline, but then we add a contingency reserve, and we add that for unknown risks, and we use that to create the project budget overall. But then we add on top of that a management reserve, and that management reserve is for unexpected activities that are added to the project budget, and that brings us to our overall total for our project. With our project team composition and structure, we might have a choice between different people, internal to our organization or external to our organization. Now we're going to need to consider certain things: the cost of those people, the expertise of those people, and the location of those people. So do we want them close by, or is it okay to have them around the world? When we're planning communication, good communication helps us engage with our stakeholders effectively. Consider these things. Who needs the information? What information do they need? Why do we need to share this information? How do we provide this information to them? When and how often do we need to share it? Who and where do we get that information from? Planning for our physical resources is for anything that is not a person. Now, planning includes estimating for those resources, knowing the supply chain and logistics of those resources, and then resource management, managing those resources. We want to consider the lead time for delivery, movement and transport, and storage of materials. Now, we need to think strategically about when to order those materials so we're not waiting for them as our project goes along. When we're planning procurement, Once the scope is known, we want to do a make or buy analysis. What can be made in-house versus bought? And what is the upfront cost of buying it or versus making it versus the ongoing cost? This is something that people forget very often. They might think that something's cheap to buy up front from an external vendor, but then the ongoing costs are much more, and that's where people get caught. When we're planning for change in our project, we want to prepare a process for adapting our plan throughout the project as it goes along. This might include a change control process, reprioritizing a backlog with a product owner, rebaselining project artifacts or outcomes, and change might occur due to environmental changes like the organization, customer requests, or gaining a deeper understanding of the product or project scope. Planning also includes metrics, and metrics is how we measure the work. There's a separate complete measurement domain, and we'll go into that later. When we're planning for alignment, planning activities and artifacts need to remain integrated throughout the project, and so that's how we need to align. For example, requirements need to align with scope plans. Scope plans might need to align with schedule and cost management plans because they're all related. The scope impacts the cost. Quality and testing plans need to align with scope management plans. Logistics plans might need to align with resources plans. And the project management plan, overall, integrates everything all together. Our next section is the project work. Now, the outcomes we're looking for the project work itself are efficient and effective project performance, appropriate project processes, appropriate communication with stakeholders, efficient management of physical resources and procurements, improved capability of our people and team and the product due to continuous learning and process improvement as we're going along. Key terms that we'll see are bid documents, which is proposals from our sellers, bidder conferences to get multiple ideas from different bidders, explicit knowledge, which can be codified into a process, and tacit knowledge, which is more personal knowledge, so beliefs or experience. With our project processes, we want to periodically review the project process to make sure it still fits and tailor it to suit the environment we're currently in. We can use things like lean production methods, retrospectives or lessons learned, asking what's working well or what do we still need to improve, and where is the next best funding spent. And of course we can use things like cost-benefit analysis or our value stream map up the top here. When we're balancing competing constraints, this is an ongoing activity, and it can be done with the product owner or within the project, depending on how we're managing it. As you can see, the constraints are scope, quality, cost, and time. And in an agile project, the scope is variable, but in a waterfall project or a predictive project, the scope is usually fixed, and the other items are more variable. We can use trade-off sliders in our project to show people which ones are more fixed and which ones are more flexible. So in this case, the time is very fixed, but in this case also the quality is the most flexible, so we may not deliver the best quality product, but we absolutely have to deliver on time. When we're maintaining project team focus, this is the project manager's responsibility, and it includes things like short and long-term projections of progress towards goals. So how is the team performing? That's going to impact our project team's focus. Balancing the workload amongst the team, making sure that no one is too overloaded and no one's slacking off, and assessing if team members are satisfied with their work. We're going to need project communications and engagement, and communications include formal, informal, verbal, and written communications. They're collected in meetings, conversations, or pulled from repositories as a pull communication, and they're distributed as per the communications plan. If we're getting abundant ad hoc requests in our project, this indicates we're not communicating enough, so we just need to communicate more or in different ways to our project stakeholders. When we're managing physical resources, resources include materials and supplies from third parties. The resource process might include planning, ordering that resource, transporting it, storing it, tracking and controlling that resource. Now, large amounts of resources require a logistics system documented in company policies. And this is where lean comes into it as well. We want to eliminate wait time and reduce handling. These are the lean wastes, otherwise known as downtime. We've got defects or rework, which we want to avoid. Overproduction, we want to avoid waiting, non-effective use of time and talent. Avoid transport if we can. Avoid too much inventory if we can. Avoid excessive motion and excessive processing when we're getting all these resources together, and that will help us be more on time with our project. Working with procurements. Procurements involve contracts for things like material, equipment, labor, or services. Project managers won't usually write a contract themselves, but will work with contracting officers in the organization with rigorous policies in place. A project manager might work with technical experts and the contracting officers to develop things like request for proposal, statement of work, and the terms and conditions within your project. The bidding process might include documents such as request for information, which is to gather information from the market, request for proposal, which is where scope is complex, so we might need different proposals, request for a quote, where price is the main factor. And when we're choosing a vendor, source selection, this is often based on price, the delivery, so the terms of delivery, and the experience of our vendor. Once a vendor is selected, update the project plan with all of those vendor details, the dates, costs, quality requirements, and the vendor is now a project stakeholder that we need to keep engaged and keep communicating with as we go along. Monitoring new work and changes. Scope may evolve and change over the life of your project. For adaptive projects, the project manager works with the product owner to prioritize the scope in the product backlog. Low priority items may not get done in favor of high priority items. For predictive projects, which is our waterfall type projects, a change request is raised, which goes through the change control board for approval, noting any impact to cost, quality, scope, or schedule, which are all of those constraints that we spoke about before. Once approved, the change is added to the project documents and communicated to all of the stakeholders in the project. Learning throughout the project. Have a knowledge management process to capture those lessons learned through a retrospective or a review for other projects to use later on. Here's where we're going to look at explicit knowledge, which is a process and it can be taught, and tacit knowledge, which includes our beliefs and our experience. Now we're delving into the delivery performance domain. Outcomes we're looking for in delivery are that the project contributes to business objectives and the strategy, the overall strategy. Projects realize the outcomes that they intended. The benefits we wanted are realized in the intended time frame. The project is clear on the requirements, and stakeholders accept and are happy with the deliverables in the end. The key terms that we'll come across are a requirement, which is the capability needed in one of those products or features, a work breakdown structure, which breaks down the work into smaller pieces, definition of done, quality, and the cost of quality. Delivery of value. How do we need to deliver that value? We could use adaptive, which is our incremental and iterative approaches, delivers value along the journey, or predictive, which delivers value all in one go at the end. Now, value remains long after the project is finished, and value is defined and monitored with a business case at the very beginning. So this tells us if we are actually delivering value and why we're setting up this project. And then it's also monitored in baseline documents within the project as we go along. With different deliverables, a deliverable is an increment of value, which is a feature or a product. We're going to have terms like requirements, the conditional capability that needs to be met to satisfy the customer need in the end. Requirements elicitation. Elicitation is to draw out those requirements from where they're coming from the customers. We want to document them as clear, concise, verifiable, so make sure we can check them and test them. Consistent, we want them to be consistent across different requirements. Complete and traceable back to the requirements once we've delivered what they wanted. They're evolving and discovering requirements, and for this we can use prototypes, storyboards, mock-ups, so we can create models or pictures or ideas before we create the actual item itself so that we can save a bit of money if things go wrong. When we're managing requirements, ineffective requirements equal things like rework, scope creep, customer dissatisfaction, budget overruns, schedule delay, and project failure. So often one person is ultimately accountable for the things that are being delivered, and we want to use backlogs or a traceability matrix when we're managing these requirements. We're also going to be doing things like scope decomposition. This is a work breakdown structure where we take the themes in our Agile charter, we turn them into epics, so smaller items again, and we turn those epics into user stories, which are items that people can actually work on and deliver. Now, there are other ways we can do this. We might have a product roadmap, and we might turn them into features, and then we might turn those features into work packages. Whatever we call them, it's the same idea of scope decomposition. How do we define completion of those deliverables? We want things like acceptance criteria. So what is the criteria for this item to be accepted by the customer? Technical performance measures, the definition of ready for us to start work on an item, and the definition of done for when we're actually delivering that item and people are happy. You might experience moving targets of completion. So projects operating in uncertainty or changing markets, these things might impact the deliverables, and this is known as done drift. When we're delivering for quality, quality requirements are reflected in the completion criteria, the definition of done, the statement of work, and requirements documentation. Now, those who receive the benefit ultimately bear the cost of bad quality. So that's why we want to look after our customers, make sure we're still delivering good quality items, otherwise they're going to bear the cost of that. Which brings us to the cost of quality. Now, there are a few different items here, such as prevention costs, so preventing the bad quality in the first place. We might have appraisal costs, which is finding the bad quality. So as we're developing something or creating something, we might be checking it to make sure that it's still okay. Internal failure costs is if we deliver something internally, but we haven't released it to the customer yet, and then we find it and it fails, then we have to go back and we have to fix it all up, and that's a little bit more costly. But lastly, the most costly is external failure, which is when it gets to the customer and it fails in their hands. As we can see, the cost of change is higher towards the end of the project or towards the deliverable being delivered. To counter this, we want to build in quality and find those defects before they reach the end customer. Suboptimal outcomes that we might experience. Now, there's always a chance that a project does not meet its outcomes. Projects are very tricky environments and complex environments as well. We might have uncertain environments or markets, changing markets, or our competitor might get there first. Effective project management can help, but there is always risk, and that risk needs to be managed. Now we're into the measurement performance domain, and the outcomes we're looking for here are a reliable understanding of the status of the project, actionable data so that we can make the right decisions, timely actions to keep the project on track, achieving targets and generating business value due to correct decisions. And the key terms we'll come across are things like metrics, baselines, so baselines documents for our schedule, scope, or cost, dashboards so we can see how things are going, and we want to evaluate the performance compared to the plan, track and utilize resources, demonstrate accountability, and feed conversations about project trade-offs or product trade-offs. So all of these require measurement and metrics. Now, how do we establish effective measures? We might use things like key performance indicators, KPIs, or objectives and key results, OKRs. Leading indicators we can use are things like the size of a project. So if it's really, really big, maybe it's going to be difficult to manage. The items in a backlog, have we got a lot left to deliver? And lack of processes. Maybe we're going to run into problems in the future because we don't have a clear process involved. Lagging indicators are things like deliverables already completed, the schedule or cost variance that's already happened, and resources that we have already consumed. But we can use those to have a look into the future to see if we're on track or off track. Effective metrics are smart, they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Now, what do we want to measure in our project? We want deliverable metrics. So this is for the product or the feature. This might include things like errors or defects, measurements of performance, efficiency and reliability, and technical performance measures. Now we might have delivery metrics as well, delivering in our project, the work in progress, the lead time for something to be delivered, the cycle time for a smaller piece to be delivered, the queue size, for example, how much is left to go, and the batch size, how much are we getting done in certain sprints, so in a 2-week sprint, for example. And of course, our project efficiency, how efficient is everything going? With our baselined performance versus our actual performance, we're going to look at start and finish dates, effort and duration, the schedule variance, the schedule performance index, feature completion rates, how fast are we completing things, actual cost to planned cost, and that cost variance in the end, and that includes the cost performance index as well that you'll come across. Resources we'll use are planned versus actual resource use and the cost of that too. We're going to measure business value, and this includes the cost to benefit ratio. So what's the cost of everything versus the benefit that we're getting in the end? The planned versus actual benefits delivery, return on investment or ROI, or net present value you'll see as well, NPV. We want to measure stakeholders with our Net Promoter Score, so this is where we're measuring their engagement, a mood chart, morale of the team, and turnover of the team. That's what we can measure there. We might measure with forecasts with our estimate to complete, ETC, estimate at completion, EAC, variance at completion, VAC, and the to complete performance index, TCPI. We might use regression analysis to see trends and forecast those into the future, or throughput analysis to see how fast things are moving through the system. When we're presenting information, we can use things like dashboards, information radiators, which is a visible backlog or burn down charts or risks. We might use visual controls like task boards, burn charts, or other charts. And there are certain measurement pitfalls that we want to avoid. These are things like the Hawthorne effect, where what we measure actually influences people's behavior. So we have to be careful what we are measuring. Vanity metrics, so things that might seem important but actually don't move the needle towards a better strategy or a better outcome for our organization. Demoralization. If it's not achievable, people will get demoralized. Misusing the metrics, so using the metrics for bad and not for good. Confirmation bias, where we're actually just trying to confirm something that we want to be true instead of that's actually true. And lastly, correlation versus causation, where something that just because something is happening at the same time doesn't mean that that thing caused that thing to happen. So that's correlation versus causation. When we're troubleshooting performance, it's good to have agreed to plans for measuring outside of threshold ranges. And using measurements to grow and improve, the intent of displaying all of that data is ultimately to learn and improve. It's really best to report information that will allow the team to learn, facilitate a real decision, help avoid an issue in the future, or prevent performance breakdown in the future as well. Now we're into the uncertainty project performance domain, and the outcomes we're looking for here are awareness of the environment. So the political, environmental, social, technological, legal, and other things, all of those things we need to be aware of. Proactively exploring uncertainty. Awareness of the interdependence of multiple variables of the project. So this is complexity. Ability to anticipate threats and opportunities and understand their consequences. And the project delivery, we want little impact from any of those unforeseen events. Opportunities we want to realize to improve the project performance based on all of these things, and using cost and schedule reserves to meet the project objectives if any of these pop up, any of these uncertain things pop up in the future. Key terms we'll see are uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, volatility, and risk, and this is PESTLE and VUCA, so these are the terms that you'll see come up associated with those. First, there's general uncertainty. Now, options for responding to uncertainty including gather information, prepare for multiple outcomes, use set-based design or prototyping, so use models to work our way through it before actually committing any money, and build resilience into the process, respond or change quickly. Ambiguity is also going to come up. Now there's conceptual ambiguity, which is a general lack of understanding of the item, or situational ambiguity, which is where there's more than one outcome possible, and so it's ambiguous, we're not sure which way to go. We can use here progressive elaboration, so in other words, deliver smaller features more often to work our way through those different paths. We can use experiments, so smaller items before we're delivering the actual item, and again to save costs, and prototyping. Complexity is another one, and complexity is a characteristic that makes something difficult to manage with many interconnected influences. Approaches we can use for complexity are decoupling all of those interconnected things, so disconnecting the parts to reduce all of those variables, and we can use simulation. So Monte Carlo simulation does thousands or tens of thousands or 100,000 different runs of the same situation with different variables in each one, so we can see the range of outcomes and then respond accordingly. We might want to reframe this complexity. So with diversity, we can get a view from different perspectives to get an answer. We might balance with lagging and leading data to get the right answer as well. Or we might use process-based approach, which is iterating or adding features incrementally, so just uncovering it as we go, engaging more with our stakeholders, and error-proofing the item or making it fail-safe if we can. We're going to come across volatility, and this is where something is subject to rapid or unpredictable change. We can use things like alternatives analysis, so different alternatives and look at the pros and cons for each, and reserves, so contingency reserves and management reserves if things go wrong as well. Then we've got good old-fashioned risk, and we want to capture risk with its probability of happening, so how probable is it that it occurs, and the impact if it actually does occur, and we can give that a number or we can give that a name, and there are different ways to do that here, but we want to capture those two things. With threats, we're going to do things like avoid the threat, escalate the threat to a manager if we need to, transfer the threat to another department or organization if we can, mitigate that threat with controls or ways to control that risk, or accept the threat if it's something that's acceptable to the organization. Now we might come across uncertain opportunities as well. And that's where we want to exploit those opportunities. We might want to escalate it as well to a manager if we need approval there. We might want to share that opportunity with another department or another organization. We want to enhance the opportunity. And ultimately, we might just want to accept the opportunity as well. With risk, we can use management and contingency reserves and have a regular risk review. And that is the first section of the PMBOK guide. You guys are doing amazing. Stick with it. The last two sections are much shorter than the first section, so that's really, really good. I think you're doing an amazing job. Let's get into the next section now, which is tailoring our project. And with tailoring, why do we want to tailor? We're going to go into what to tailor. We're going to go into the tailoring process and tailoring each of the performance domains and how to do it. Tailoring is deliberately adapting the project management approach, governance or process to suit the environment that we're in. Why do we want to tailor? Tailoring should reflect the size, the duration, the complexity of the project, and be adapted to the industry and the project management maturity of the organization. For example, a team with less experience could use an out-of-the-box method, but a team with more experience might tailor it to their individual needs. We want to tailor anything in a project to suit the situation and gain successful delivery. When we're tailoring the life cycle and development approach, we can use a combination of predictive, which is our waterfall approach, hybrid, iterative, incremental, and adaptive or agile development approaches that we looked at earlier. We can tailor the processes, so decide which portions of the development approach should be added, modified, removed, blended, or aligned. So, for example, we want the same definitions across things like risk. When we're tailoring engagement, we want to look at the people, decide who to use in particular areas, what's their experience. Empowerment, can you give more empowerment and flexibility, or in other situations we might need more supervision or direction. With integration, how to create a diverse project team, including external members as well. When we're tailoring the tools in our project, what software or equipment should we use? Factor in cost, organizational preferences, and existing items that we have already. When we're tailoring methods and artifacts, tailor the documents, the artifacts and methods so they are appropriate for the project and the organization. And that brings us to the tailoring process. So with this, we want to select the initial development approach or anything that we're looking at. Then we want to tailor it for the organization that we're working in. Then we want to tailor it for the specific project that we're working on. And lastly, we want to implement ongoing improvements. So we want to see if it's working and improve it over time. When we're tailoring as well, we're going to select the initial development approach. And here's where we need to apply our knowledge of the product and the necessary delivery cadence. So what meetings are required, how often do we need to meet, what's the rhythm of our project. You can use a suitability filter based on predictive, hybrid, adaptive approaches. For example, we might have predictive where there's high risk or the time frame is long, or adaptive where we've got changing requirements and the need to deliver value early or move really fast. Tailoring for the organization is where the organization might have a project methodology, management or development approach already in place, and it's established governance processes as well. Now there may be contract terms that we need to meet if we're under contract. All of these things will change how we tailor for the organization. Tailoring for the project, things we'll need to consider are the product or deliverable. So there might be compliance or criticality, the type of product, industry or market, technology involved, the time frame, the stability of requirements, the security needed, or incremental delivery or delivering in one big bang. When we're looking at the project team, we're going to consider the team size, the team geography, organizational distribution, the project team experience, and the access that we have to the customer. When we're considering culture, do we have sufficient buy-in from all of the people? Do we have sufficient trust and empowerment of the team as needed? And lastly, organizational culture. We need to make sure that this does align with the project approach and we can implement ongoing improvement as we go along. Now we're going to need to tailor the performance domains, and these are all of the ones that we've been through, like stakeholder, team, development approach and lifecycle, planning, the project work, delivery, measurement, and uncertainty. Each of these can be tailored. When we're tailoring for our stakeholders, we want to ask, is there a collaborative environment? Are stakeholders internal or external? Is technology available for communicating with our stakeholders? Are diverse languages spoken or even jargon within the company? How many stakeholders do we have? For more stakeholders, more networks equals more complexity. Are there already existing relationships? With our project team, we're going to ask things like, is the team co-located or dispersed? Are there diverse viewpoints and cultures involved? Are there internal people or contractors external to the organization? Is there an established project team culture already? Are there existing tools or are there new tools? Does the team need training? And are there any special needs that the team needs? When we're looking at the development approach and lifecycle, the things that we'll ask here are which development approach is appropriate for the product, service, or result, based on the speed, the quality, and the scope needs that we need to deliver. Are there any formal or informal audit or governance policies or procedures already in place? When we're tailoring for planning, we're going to ask things like, do any internal or external environmental factors impact the planning, things that are going on in the organization or in the market? Do resources and their productivity affect durations? Do we have the right people on board? Can they deliver fast enough, or do we need to adjust? Are there formal or informal policies for cost estimating and budgeting? Do we need to go to a certain department? How does the organization estimate cost? With adaptive approaches, is there already a process in place? What if we have multiple procurements? And are there laws or regulations affecting contracting? When we're tailoring the project work, the things we'll ask here are management processes. Are they based on culture or complexity? How will the knowledge be used to foster collaboration? What information will be collected and how will it be managed over the project? How will we handle the lessons learned that we pick up along the way? And is there a formal knowledge management repository that we need to engage with? Tailoring for delivery, we're going to ask, are there formal or informal requirements management systems in place? Are there formal or informal validation and control related policies? So do we need to keep everything under control? Do we have a steering committee or do we have change control board? Are these already in place in the organization? What quality policies, tools, techniques, or templates already exist in the organization for us to use? Are there any specific industry standards? Are there any unstable requirements? So how will we manage those? And managing for uncertainty, the things we'll ask, what is the risk appetite of our organization and the product, or even just the culture within the project itself? How are threats and opportunities identified and addressed as we go along in the project? How will complexity and uncertainty impact our project? Does project size impact the risk approach? And how strategically important is the project itself? Lastly, with measurement, we're going to ask, how is value measured? Can we measure financial versus non-financial value? How will the project enable data capture and report those benefits to the organization? And what are the project status reporting requirements? And now we're on to the last section, which is models, methods, and artifacts. And these are the things like the actual things that we'll do on a day-to-day basis, the methods we'll go through as we manage our project. And there's a whole bunch of things to go through here. You're on to the last section and you are doing so great. Keep it up, guys, and keep learning. I absolutely know that you can do this, and I know you can use this to pass your exam if that's what you want, or just get better at project management yourself. Let's get into this section. Models, methods, and artifacts. A model helps explain how something works in the real world. And now we've got different models. We've got situational leadership models. So Ken Blanchard's Situational Leadership 2 measures competence of a person and the commitment of the person as well. And the Oscar coaching model is we look at the outcome that we want, this current situation, the choices or consequences of doing different actions for the person, the actions that we want a person to take, and then reviewing all of these things and seeing where do we go from there. Models for communication are cross-cultural communication. This is where the message is influenced by the sender and receiver's current knowledge, experience, language, thinking, and communication style. And we have to understand that everyone is a little bit different. Even when we're in the same organization or country, even so, we'll have different knowledge and experience, and these need to be adjusted for. We'll also look at the effectiveness of communication channels. And this is from Alistair Cockburn, and it's measured by richness and effectiveness. So richness means that we're able to handle multiple information cues simultaneously, get rapid feedback, it's personal, and it uses natural language. So it's, for example, face-to-face. And then how effective is that over time? Now we're also looking at the Gulf of Execution and Evaluation. This is from Donald Norman, and the Gulf of Execution is, does it match what we expected it to do? And evaluation, does it support the user to discover how to interact with it? Or does it just leave them barren and trying to figure it out for themselves? Models for motivation with our team. We've got Herzberg's theory of motivation. With this, we've got hygiene factors, so just the normal, stable factors of motivation, where we've got a decent salary, decent and fair policies in place, physical environment being nice with enough sunlight and not hurting our backs and that sort of thing. But then we've got motivational factors. Once those hygiene factors are met, we want achievement in the organization and we want growth for ourselves as well. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, where intrinsic is internal, and that's things like autonomy. So can we go about our own way to solve the problem? Are we working towards mastery of this item? And do we have a higher purpose for what we're working on? Extrinsic is external motivation, where we're looking at money, bonuses, or status external to ourselves. The theory of needs from David McClellan, people are driven by achievement, power, or affiliation to something great. And theory X, Y, and Z from Douglas McGregor. We've got X, where people are driven only by income. They're not ambitious, and these people need micromanagement. But then we've got Y theory people who are intrinsically motivated to do good work. And we can manage these as more of a coach and just coach these people. But then we've got Z, which is where people are motivated by a higher calling, and they are working with a job for life. There are common models for change. So managing change in organizations, this is from the Project Management Institute itself, where we formulate the change, we plan the change, we implement the change, we sustain that change, and then we manage the transition to the new state. Then we've got ADKAR as well, which is very popular, where we want people to have awareness of the change, desire to change, knowledge of what is changing, the ability to change themselves, and also reinforcement once that change is in place. Then we've got the 8 steps to change from John Cotter, where we want to create urgency around the change, form a powerful coalition, so make sure we've got the right people on board, creating a vision for that future state, communicating that vision, removing obstacles to the new state, creating short-term wins as we go along, building on that change and anchoring those changes in corporate culture. There's the Virginia Satir model, where we're looking at the late status quo, which is business as usual, the foreign element coming in, which is a shift in the status quo. Then we've got chaos because things are new and different. Then we've got the transforming idea, and then practice and integration, and then we've finally got the new status quo. With the transition model, it was from William Bridges, we've got something that is ending. Then we're going through the state of losing and letting go of that item. Then we've got the neutral zone, and finally we've got the new beginning for the new state. There are models for complexity, and with complexity we might use the Sinofin framework from David Snowden. If an obvious cause-effect relationship exists, we can use best practices to make a decision. If a complicated relationship exists, we want to assess the facts and just use good practices. If complex relationships or unknown unknowns exist, we want to probe the environment, we want to iterate forward. If chaotic environments exist, we want to stabilize the situation and take steps to reduce the situation to complex. Lastly, if a disordered situation exists, break it into smaller parts and assess it from there. We might use the Stacey matrix from Ralph Stacey. This measures by the uncertainty of the deliverable and the technology to create it, by how simple it is, complicated it is, complex it is, or chaotic the item is. There are models for team development. With team development, we've got Tuckman's ladder, where the team is first forming, then we're storming. So there's lots of conflict as people work out their roles and responsibilities. They're norming and getting into normal rhythms and cadence. Performing once we've got everything sorted out. And finally, as the project finishes, we're adjourning. There's the Drexler-Siblet team performance model, where we want our team to know the orientation, why, trust building, so who does what, goal clarification, what it is we're here to do, the commitment, how we're going to do it, implementation, so the plan of how to do it, then we're moving into high performance and ultimately renewal as we move through the processes. Other commonly used models, we've got conflict model, where we want to confront or problem solve with the problem. We might use collaborating, we might compromise with our conflict, we might smooth or accommodate for the other person, or we might force through something or an idea with a conflict, or we might withdraw from the conflict or avoid it. That includes negotiation as well, where we might have win-win approaches from all of those ideas, win-lose or lose-win, and then finally lose-lose. Funnily enough, if we're compromising, usually it's a lose-lose situation because we're giving something up and the other person is giving something up. So it's actually known as a lose-lose situation. To have a win-win situation, we need character, maturity, and trust, and we need to approach the other person and look at their point of view. There's the planning sweet spot from Barry Boehm. The planning sweet spot is between planning up front to reduce risk and the time to market benefits. So we want to reduce the time to market, but we also want to give enough time for planning. And somewhere in the middle there is the planning sweet spot. We've got the process groups from the Project Management Institute, where we're initiating, planning our project, executing our project, monitoring and controlling our project, and closing our project as we go along. And we've got the salience model, which looks at power, legitimacy, and urgency of the stakeholders that we're dealing with. Now we're looking at commonly used methods. A method is a means for achieving an outcome, a result, or a deliverable. Now there are methods for data gathering and analysis, and we're going to go through a speed round here. We've got alternatives analysis, assumption and constraint analysis, benchmarking, where we're looking at the same process amongst different teams or organizations, business justification analysis, where we're looking at the payback period or internal rate of return. Higher is better here. Return on investment, which is the cost of the investment versus the return that we're going to get on it. Net present value. Cost benefit analysis, which is our benefit divided by our cost. The check sheet for defects or sales, cost of quality, which we've looked at, prevention, appraisal, internal failure, external failure, decision tree analysis, earned value analysis, expected monetary value, forecasting, influence diagrams, life cycle assessment, make or buy analysis, which we looked at as well, probability and impact matrix, which we use for risk, process analysis like process flows or process flowcharts, regression analysis, where we're looking at trends of items, reserves and reserve analysis, which we've looked at as well, root cause analysis, which is our Ishikawa diagram or 5 whys, getting to the root cause of the issue, sensitivity analysis, which is our tornado chart, so that's how sensitive an item to changes in the future, simulations like Monte Carlo simulations, stakeholder analysis like our impact over influence that we did look at before, SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of an item, the trend analysis, value stream mapping, variance analysis, and what if scenario analysis. We did it, well done. We're going to have methods for estimating, and we might have affinity grouping or analogous estimating, which is where we're estimating based on things that are similar to something else. Function point metrics is the amount of business functionality in an information system. Multi-point estimating, which uses the optimistic estimate, most likely estimate, and pessimistic estimate, and we divide that by 3 to just get an average amongst the 3. Parametric estimating uses a parameter, like $50 a meter or $80 an hour. Relative estimating is used in Agile, and it's estimated by how they relate to other estimates. Single point estimating and story point estimating, we might use the Fibonacci method, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21 to estimate for story points. And then we've got wideband Delphi estimating, which does multiple rounds of estimates and starts broad and then over time becomes accurate as we do more of those estimates. Methods for meetings and events. We've got a kickoff meeting, we've got iteration planning, backlog refinement, daily stand-ups, iteration review and retrospectives, which are all agile or adaptive meetings and methods. We've got the change control board, bidder conferences, lessons learned. And we've got planning meetings, project closeout meetings, project reviews, release planning, risk review meetings, status meetings, and steering committee meetings as well. Other methods that we'll come across are things like impact mapping, modeling, the net promoter score, where we ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend us to a friend? And we take that and use that for our customers. We might have prioritization schema, for example, Moscow, so must have, should have, could have, or won't have for an item, or time boxing that item. Commonly used artifacts that we'll come across. An artifact is a template, document, or project deliverable. Strategic artifacts, we might have our business case, we might have the business model canvas, we might have the project brief or the project charter, we might have project vision statement and the product roadmap as we go along. Logs and registrars we might have are the assumption log, the backlog, the risk-adjusted backlog, which is where we've got risk items or items of risk added into our backlog and it's adjusted for that. We've got the change log, the issue log, and the lessons learned register. And we've got our risk register for capturing all those risks and uncertainties. The stakeholder register captures all of the stakeholders that we need to engage with in our project. Other commonly used artifacts are things like our project plans. And this describes the how, so the how-to, the process we'll use and the boundaries for each of these areas, like the change control plan, the communications management plan, cost management, iteration plan for Agile, procurement management for external items, project management plan, which ties it all together, quality management plan for testing or quality, release plan for when we're releasing an item, requirements management plan, so tying it back to the requirements and the scope, making sure that's all managed together, resource management plan, risk management plan, scope, schedule, stakeholder engagement plan, and our test plan as well. We might see hierarchy charts like an organizational breakdown structure, a product breakdown structure, a resource breakdown structure, a risk breakdown structure, or a work breakdown structure to break down the work into smaller pieces to work on. Baselines we might see. These are the original estimates for the budget, the milestone schedules, performance measurement baselines like scope, schedule, or cost, and the project schedule. Scope baselines like the scope statement, which is the work breakdown structure, and the work breakdown structure dictionary. Artifacts for visual data and information. We're going to use affinity diagrams, burn up or burn down charts, cause and effect diagrams, cumulative flow diagrams, cycle time charts, which is where each one of these items represents how long something is taking according to the days on the left-hand side here. Dashboards, flow charts for a process, Gantt charts for our schedule, histograms as we capture data, information radiators, so putting all of our information on a wall, lead time charts, prioritization matrix, or a schedule network diagram. We might use requirements traceability matrix, resource assignment matrix, scatter diagram, S-curve for capturing data or displaying data, stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, story map, throughput chart, use cases, value stream maps, and velocity charts. Reports we might see are the quality report, the risk report, or the status report. Agreements and contracts, we might see fixed price contracts, cost reimbursable contracts, which is where we have the seller cost and then they add a little bit on top for the seller profit. And these might include the cost plus award fee, cost plus fixed fee, or cost plus incentive fee. We might have time and materials contracts, indefinite delivery, indefinite quality contracts, which is an indefinite quantity of goods within upper and lower limits within a fixed time frame. And we might have other agreements like Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Agreement, Service Level Agreement, or Basic Ordering Agreement, BOA. Other artifacts we'll see are an activity list, bid documents like a request for information, request for quote, request for proposal, metrics, project calendar, requirements documentation, and project team calendar, or user stories. And that's it, you've done it. You've made it to the end of the Project Management Body of Knowledge 7th edition, the entire thing. We did the whole thing. Well done, guys. I knew you could do it, and I have complete faith in you that you can take this knowledge and become a better project worker, project manager, or just use it to improve your life. I've had an absolute blast doing this with you, and I hope you've had a good time too. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.